Welcome, everyone, to our ongoing lessons in the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, the universal laws, the divine laws for all of mankind. We are towards the end of the text that we've been using for quite a while. We've gone through pretty much the whole book. The Theory and Practice of Universal Ethics, the Noachide Laws, by Rabbi Dr. Shimon Dovid Cowen of Australia. So if you're following along inside, we are up to chapter 13 in part 2. That would be page 351. Page 351. Chapter 3. The treatment of nature. Overview. A. Preface. Human sovereignty over nature. Nature as object, goals and means. B. The permitted use of animals and natural resources. Pain and resource destruction for valid human benefit. The minimization of pain and destruction of resources. C. Further refinement in the use of animals and nature. Proportionately of goals and means, saving animals from pain and conserving resources. Compassion and minimization of waste as virtues. D. Altering the identity of natural species. Grafting trees, crossbreeding animals, and genetic mutation. Finally, E. Prohibited food, the flesh of a living creature. Definition of the living creature, which creatures? What parts of the creature? Further issues related to forbidden food. All right? So basically, this is all dealing with the mitzvah, the prohibition, the commandment that no one is allowed to eat what's called aver min hachai, a part of a living creature that was removed or detached from that animal before the animal was dead. So as by way of extension, we're dealing over here with all the different things of how we deal with nature, and we're going to get into what are we allowed to do, what are we not allowed to do. Can we use leather of animals, not for the sake of food, to make shoes, jackets, purses, wallets, you name it. Okay. All right. Let us begin. We're on the top of page 352. A. Preface. Human sovereignty over nature. The law given to Noah prohibiting consumption of the flesh or limb of a living creature frames an entire practical, ethical relationship to nature in Noachide law. By way of introduction, and to distinguish the stance of the Noachide laws from a variety of contemporary philosophies of environmentalists and animal rights, it is necessary first to recognize that the Bible gives the human being sovereignty over nature. That's number one. Not all philosophies accept that, and they're wrong. Because Hashem, in the Bible, definitely, the verse is very clear that the human being has sovereignty and rules over nature. It's all here to serve us. It's all here for serving us. The verse states that upon the creation of the human being, the human was told to fill the earth and subdue it. The word in the original is v'chiv shuha. Anchor it, take it over, subdue it. At the same time, human beings were initially restricted in their use of creation. They were not permitted to kill animals, whether in order to eat their flesh or to utilize other parts of the bodies of animals, such as their hides, for clothing. Originally, that was not allowed. After the flood, permission was given to the human being to kill animals, but at the same time, to Noah was communicated the instruction not to consume the limb or the flesh of a living creature. The human was given sovereignty over nature by virtue of the significance of his or her having been created in the image of Hashem. This significance is twofold. One is that the human being is able to apprehend divine values in the light of which he or she are bidden to settle and civilize the world. Animals, and needless to say other parts of nature, do not have an ethical sense. The second is that the human being possesses free choice whether or not to behave ethically. Accordingly, it is meaningful to give an ethical imperative only to an agent with free choice to act ethically. So everything else, besides for the humans, does not have free choice. They pretty much work on instinct, and they do not go against the will of Hashem. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but let me just put out there in case some of you which are thinking a little bit deeply may have this question, and that would be, why do we find that the Torah, the Bible, does say at times that an animal is to be stoned to death? So why are we punishing an animal if it has no choice and it does the will of Hashem? Well, for one, in the case where a human being committed adultery or bestiality with an animal, so that animal now has no right to exist. It may not have been the fault of the animal at all, but the fact that the human being sinned and this animal served as a stumbling block, as an obstacle and a means for the human being to make a bad choice, that animal no longer should be. And sometimes we say that an animal should not exist because we don't want to shame the person and be able to point to that animal and say, well, see, that is what so-and-so did with. But then we also find certain cases where an animal that causes damage, let's say an ox gores a person or kills someone, so then in certain situations, there too, the animal is to be stoned to death. And again, just simply put, that's because it's a danger to society. So if this animal, after a number of warnings that the owner was warned, continuously did this terrible thing, so then the animal is to be put to death because it is a danger. But it's not the same idea of punishment, and no, there is no heaven for animals. I'm sorry to burst the bubble of any of you people that may be reading whatever comics or whatever it may be, or whatever cartoons, whatever they may be, where there is the afterlife for animals. That's not so, and cats don't have 9 lives. So be that as it may, the human being is here as the intelligent being and the one that has free choice. So actually, the entire world is here to enable us to utilize it properly, to make this world a dwelling place, as it were, for Hashem. So we're to use the world. Now, before the flood, from creation till the great flood, we were not allowed to kill animals at all. Well, sacrifice would be different, but I'm saying for the purposes of eating or using the hide of the animal. Not talking about after the animal died on its own, but we weren't allowed to kill any animal for food, and therefore we all had to be vegetarians. For whatever reason, Hashem changed that after the flood, and that's the 7th added commandment, which makes the Noahide commandments now 7. Adam, the first man, was only given 6. The 7th one, after reinstating the first 6 to Noah. The seventh one added is this one of animals, that you're not allowed to be cruel and you can't eat a limb or flesh or part of an animal that was detached while the animal's still alive. But once the animal is dead, whether it died on its own or whether you purposely killed it, which is permitted for the sake of consumption. Being created in the image of Hashem thus relates to a divine agency on the part of the human being. Now, mind you, let's see footnote 5. Footnote 5 right now. This does not mean that in a spiritual sense, animals cannot also recognize or respond to the divine. Rather, they're not moral agents in nature. In a mystical dimension of the tradition, it is acknowledged that animals can recognize godliness. Actually, it's brought down that sometimes animals can see things that if humans would see them, we would go literally out of our minds and we would go crazy because we have what's called da'as, a certain type of a intelligence or recognition or attachment. And therefore, certain things, if we would see, we would go crazy. Whereas animals don't have da'as, and therefore they can see it. So sometimes they can see all sorts of spiritual or godly entities, and it doesn't affect them. But very clearly, the Torah, the Bible, when it states that Hashem creates man in the image of Elohim, in Hashem's image, it's only the human being. No animals are created in the image of Hashem. He and she are the subject of creation, which, drawing upon divine powers and intervention, are bidden to steer the world to its perfection. That's our job. Needless to say, the sovereignty over nature properly belongs to the human being, as being made in the image of Hashem. When the human being indeed manifests the image of Hashem, when he or she acts with refinement, restraint, self-transcendence, and in service of divinely sanctioned ideals. In other words, when we behave the way we're supposed to be, and we behave godly, then we're actually in the image of Hashem, and then we have the power and the right, and actually the responsibility to utilize all of creation. The general goal of redemption, to which the human being is called, as an agent of the divine, involves the repair and perfection of the creation, to the point where godliness will be manifested within it. The world in which we live until then is an imperfect one. Its physical and spiritual imperfections go hand in hand. Part of the disrepair of an unredeemed world, indeed a corrupted world, is nature itself. An outcome of the cosmic transgression of humanity in the biblical event of the sin of the tree of knowledge was that nature was also corrupted. The physical earth ceased to yield a spontaneous bounty and became the human being's opponent. A struggle with nature would now be involved for nature to yield its produce. And to quote the verse right after the sin, "Cursed is the earth because of you. Thorns and thistles will it sprout for you. By the sweat of your brow will you eat bread." That is the curse that man was given about the earth after the sin. So really, eating from that tree had tremendous, tremendous negative effects, not only as a punishment for Adam, and Chava, Eve, to be expelled from the Garden of Eden, but it actually changed the entire world. And from then on, our job as human beings is to repair and to redeem the world. In the terminology of the mystic part of the Torah, mysticism and Hasidus, we are to elevate and redeem the holy sparks of godliness that are trapped in this physical world. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, going all the way back till right after creation, after the sin, which was on the sixth day of creation. As a result of this human moral disorder, there was a change also in the animal world. They too changed. The animals were created herbivorous. There was no such thing as a lion having to eat meat and devour another animal and rip it apart. Now some became predators upon other members of the animal world. So things changed. Thus, aside from the cruelty human beings can and have inflicted on animals, to which animal rights activists draw attention, a greater cruelty is arguably practiced between animals themselves. What happened to those human rights and those movements? What happened to all those people that are into human rights? What about animal rights? So why don't they protest against animals killing other animals? Anyway, beasts of prey savage their victims. The hunted whale, an object of concern for conservationists, is the mass killer of the deep in terms of quantity of marine life which it devours. The savager of nature in the mystical scheme of things now requires the human being who corrupted nature to redeem it. The words of the prophets thus speak of a redemption of nature itself. And this is, as you can see, Isaiah 11. This is the Jewish Bible. Anyone else who quotes it is quoting it from our sources, and if they decide to misuse it, that's their problem. Okay? Prophet Isaiah, the Jewish righteous prophet, says as follows. And this is very famous, of course, because this is describing the Messianic era. The wolf will live with the sheep, and the leopard will lie down with the kid. And a calf, a lion, whelp, and a fatling will walk together, and a young child will lead them. A cow and bear will graze, and their young will lie down together. And a lion, like cattle, will eat hay. A suckling will play by a viper's hole, and a newly weaned child will stretch his hand towards an adder's lair. They will neither injure nor destroy in all of my sacred mountain. For the earth will be as filled with the knowledge of Hashem as the waters cover the ocean bed. Sounds beautiful. Sounds like a world of utopia. Almost sounds unbelievable. End of quote. Thus, as part of its redemptive promise, the Bible states, I, Hashem, shall destroy the evil beast from the land. That's what it says in the Chumash, in Leviticus. This is explained by commentary to mean not that wild animals will be destroyed from the land, but rather that their savagery, their evil or wildness will be removed. So they won't be any more wild animals or bad animals because they will no longer be wild or bad. This, in turn, will be an aspect of the cessation of struggle in nature of the human being with nature as well as of species amongst each other. Not only will the animal world be transformed, but also the vegetative and inorganic levels of nature. Thus, there is a description of the miraculous cleansing of the waters of the world, which will regenerate the vegetative realm and all biological life dependent upon it. At the same time, the earth will give forth a general abundance. In short, all the conflicts, blockages, and dysfunctions within nature, as well as the very struggle of humanity with nature, will cease. The redemptive transformation which will return nature to the ideal, and more than the ideal, which it was at the beginning of the creation, will be due to a divine intervention. But that divine intervention is merited through the cumulative moral works of humanity, which include the ethical utilization of nature as set forth in Noahide law. So basically, what we're saying is, this is all about Moshiach and the Messianic era. So ultimately, at the end, it's going to happen through Hashem himself. But to get to that point, he wants to make us partners, and we have this job, which we've been working on now for thousands of years. And once we've finished doing our job, then it will happen. And the good news, of course, is, as we all know, we're at that point now. As a matter of fact, without really getting too deep into it, but this work of elevating or redeeming the holy sparks actually has ended. So tells us the prophet of our generation, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, and he told it to us in 1992. He says now, actually the end of 91, he says now the service of redeeming the holy sparks that we've just kind of generally spoke about has ended. It has been completed, has been finished, and it's done. And now we are entering this messianic era of the perfect world, etc. So we're in this, so to say, in-between stage right now for the past 30-some years. But that's a whole discussion for itself. But at any rate, the way that we elevate the sparks, the Jews have their mitzvahs that they have to do, the way that the Jewish person has to deal with the physical world and the animals and the world of vegetation and everything, and the Noahide has his way of dealing with it. And by doing so, we are actually redeeming and elevating the world and bringing it not only back to the way that it was prior to the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge, but even greater than that. Let's see a few of the footnotes. 13. So we said that miraculous cleansing of the waters. See Zechariah, Yoel, Joel, and Yechezkel, Ezekiel. All of which prophecy concerning a stream which will issue from the temple in Jerusalem and ultimately spread forth to purify the oceans of the world. This is elaborated in Talmud Tractate Shkolim, 17a, whilst it has been interpreted on a symbolic level, meaning some of the commentaries say don't take it literally, it would appear from the Talmud also to have a literal sense, as we see from the continuation of the passage in Talmud Shkolim, which discusses the transformed productivity of the land in both produce and trees of the earth in the times of the redemption. So therefore, it should be taken literally as well. Okay, 14. After we said that the earth is going to give forth an abundance of food, this is what Rambam Maimonides says all the way at the end of the very last chapter, Hilchas Melachim, Laws of Kings, chapter 12. Informs us that even luxuries will be as available as the dust of the earth. Delicacies. See also Teras Kohanim on Leviticus 26:4, which speaks of how in the redemptive future the earth will be sown and miraculously give forth fruits in the same day, just as it did at the outset of creation. Hey, the world changed, but initially it wasn't considered a miracle. Nature, for those first few days, until we changed that and messed up by eating from the tree that we were commanded not to, until that point, the world was different than we know it now. Just like we said about the animals, so too. You would sow seeds in the ground and immediately they would grow. And it says that things like that are going to happen in the future. For example, without getting, again, too much off the subject, but in the Messianic era, pregnancy will be 9 hours instead of 9 months. So a lot of changes which to us seem unbelievable and absolutely miraculous. Okay, let's continue. Nature as object. Top of page 357. The fact that the human being was given sovereignty over nature does not make nature a mere object for utilization. The creatures and things of nature are creations of Hashem. Nature, moreover, is something constantly recreated and sustained by Hashem as a whole and in each of its details. From this follow 2 points. The first is that as the product of specific divine providence, each and everything in nature is endowed with divine purpose. So it gives you a whole different perspective. Everything that we have and see and deal with in the world has a divine purpose. Accordingly, it may not be heedlessly treated. Sometimes we are bidden or permitted to consume them, such as the flesh of animals and vegetables. Sometimes we are bidden to leave them alone, and sometimes to eliminate them, such as organisms carrying diseases. But in all circumstances, thought must be given to the relation to be taken towards each and everything within the scheme of human purpose, which ultimately and cumulatively must serve the perfection and redemption of creation. So when you look at it that way, it gives you a whole different respect to everything, the earth that we step on. Everything in nature is not just nature or awesome or beautiful things, but actually they are made by Hashem for a purpose. The significance of the divine authorship of everything in nature is not that other species are equal to the human being or are even deserving of equal consideration. That's not what we're saying. You know, some people, they respect and treat animals better than they do human beings. Some of these groups or rights for animals, it's so twisted. So we're not saying that animals or things in nature are to be more respected or are equal as humans. Just as the human being is primary, so also our human purpose is primary. A person's wish to eat meat prevails over an animal's conscious wish not to be killed and eaten. Their equality amongst themselves and within the human being is limited to the fact that they were purposefully created by Hashem and should therefore not be misused. But if their whole purpose of this animal is to be food for the human being, we're not obligated to be vegetarians. So don't say, why do we have to eat meat? What do you mean? That's why the animal is here. The ox is here to plow a field and to be food for the human being. In terms of Noahide law, this means that sentient creatures should not be caused unnecessary pain, and that non-sentient parts of nature should not be subject to unnecessary destruction and waste. The second point, which flows from the divine creation and sustainment of nature, is that nature is not an independent object, a reality which is an end in or a law to itself. The human being can harm it and is enjoined not to do so. But by the same token, to believe that nature is a system, the future of which is solely in the hands of the human being, is mere hubris. The planet has no fate set solely by human beings or of its own other than through the will of Hashem, who hears human prayers, responds to the meritorious deeds, including the good husbandry of nature, of human beings, and has his own inelucutable and ultimately redemptive plans. No science can fully predict or manage the future. We can only use our reason in conjunction with divine imperatives correctly to use nature. The broadest sustainability was assured by Hashem after the flood. And we quote, "For all future days of the earth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease." Within the parameters of that divine commitment, the human being has a sphere of practical and moral action in which the harm he or she can do should be minimized and the good maximized. We have to do ours in the trust that Hashem will do his. So that's pretty much the philosophy of what we're talking about. I know it's getting late, but I want to try to, get finished with this section A and get to up to B. So please bear with me. We're at the bottom of page 358. Goals and means. The ultimate concept of the relationship between humanity and nature is that of the incorporation of nature in a project steered by humanity. It is not a project which is for the benefit of humanity alone. It is a divine project, one aimed at a general concept of redemption, the manifestation of godliness within the creation. That includes, as mentioned above, the redemption of nature itself. In this project, everything is vertically incorporated into the activities of ethically guided humans who sit at the pinnacle of nature. Indeed, nature itself has its own internal hierarchies. The animal world primarily consumes vegetation. Vegetation incorporates the powers of the minerals, inorganic, earth, and the human being consumes the animal. So there's this hierarchy. The animal is more important than the vegetative, and this is reflected in the fact that humanity was initially prohibited to kill animals, even though we were allowed to eat things that grow from the ground. The vertical order in creation is ultimately transitional towards redemption. This hierarchical structure has to do not only with subjugation, but also with elevation and refinement of the lower levels through their incorporation ultimately in the bodies and service of moral human beings. They become part of us when we consume them. That refinement establishes the conditions through which subjugation is dissolved in a messianic actualization of the harmony of all creation, the cessation of all need, domination, and competition for survival. Animals cannot redeem themselves, just as they were not responsible for their own corruption, their predatory characteristics, and savagery. They're not punished for that. Their redemption comes through the collective service of humanity in transforming the creation, in which eating the flesh of animals with the proper intention is part. There is a view that in the redemption, as a result of that refinement in the animal world itself, it will again be prohibited to kill an animal routinely to eat its flesh, as it was prohibited at the beginning of the creation. Footnote 20. Chumash Limudei Hashem. Though see Tanya Igeres HaKodesh, chapter 26, which suggests that there will be animal sacrifices in the service of the Holy Temple in Messianic age. And yes, it surely will, that we will have sacrifices in the Messianic age. The only question is, will we be eating meat if it's not sacrificial? But otherwise, sacrifices will be there. Since the ultimate concept is not the instrumentalization, but the actual progressive and redemptive transformation of nature, it follows that nature is ultimately not simply a means usable without care or consideration to an end. Rather, nature, as it is used or consumed towards this goal, should not have a harmful byproduct. The nutrition from a food eaten by a person should power an ethical life, and the waste production and the waste product of that food should be properly disposed of. So also the fuel which powers an automobile should not have a waste product which effectively contaminates the air. In Noahide law, this concept is reflected in the norm that the consumption of nature be itself constructive and not needlessly destructive in all of its facets. Every consumption or destruction should be constructive towards a goal without unnecessary destructive consequences. In the process of the incorporation towards a human vertical goal, it should not be unwarrantedly destructive or of its horizontal environment. The following sections deal with the major aspects of Noahide law in relation to nature, ultimately framed by the Noahide law prohibiting consumption of the limb or flesh of a living creature. B, the utilization of nature for human purposes under conditions limited the pain caused to animals and the destruction of physical resources. C, heightened levels of care for animal and physical resources beyond the baseline of Noahide law. D, another limitation on the human use of nature, namely prohibition on altering the identity of the species. And E, the detail of the biblical prohibition of the consumption of the limb of a living creature. All right, so it was pretty philosophical, but it's really important to understand the logic and what lies behind what we're talking about over here. So we're now going to open for any questions, comments, or what have you. Anybody, please.
Nick and then James.
Go ahead.
Yes. So, what about killing an animal for like its hide, but maybe not like for any other purpose than cosmetic?
Good question. And the short of that answer is that that's also allowed. In other words, you may have a sensitivity and you may feel that that's not within the spirit of the law and it's not a good thing to do. You have a right to have that feeling, because certain feelings we don't have a right to feel, but you have a right. And if an individual chooses that they don't want to partake in that, that's fine. It's not like you must. However, that is a good enough reason, even though you can arguably say that how is that redemptive? How is that bringing along the purpose? And then the argument can be made that the person has to be most comfortable in a permitted way in order to function at our highest level and to be able to accomplish the most. I'll throw in something which is not related, but sort of. It's a completely different topic, but we know that we're not supposed to harm ourselves, and you're not allowed to put yourself in danger or unnecessary high risk, which is a whole discussion for itself, how to define risk and danger and high risk, etc. surgery is not allowed unless it's necessary. Okay, fair enough. Every operation, surely if there's general anesthesia, there is a level of danger. However, in order to save a person's life or ease a person from a disease, that is permitted. And again, there's a lot of factors involved, but at this point, because the success rate of these types of surgery, or when it comes to a risk, so the question then becomes, what about having surgery simply for cosmetic reasons? Just for cosmetic reasons. And it's a good question, but the bottom line is that in most cases, it is allowed. And again, because the person needs to feel good about themselves in order to function at their best.
Thank you.
James?
Hi, Rabbi Turn. Thank you. This is a little more about Hasidus, but it kind of caught my eye in Isaiah 11 here. And we had this conversation in our non-Jewish Hasidus class last night, actually, talking about a pig becoming, there's a what's you gonna call it, a opinion that pig will become kosher in the Messianic age. And this caught my eye because it goes along with a theory, like a chidush I have about that, and how the pig can maybe become like a ruminant where he can chew its cud, where it does not now today. And I'm wondering if that has to do with Torah, like ingesting Torah and ruminating on Torah. And then I noticed here about the cow and the bear will graze, will graze. And then it also says the lion will be like cattle and they will eat hay. Is there what is I'm assuming there is, but is there something going on there where a ruminant, which is a kosher animal from Klipa Noiga, is there something what is going on where you have the completely impure Klipot souls somehow becoming like Klipa Noga souls or some such? Am I not seeing that right? Is something going on there? Do you know of in Hasidus a deeper perspective? What can you tell me about that?
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep it short because that would be it'll be a whole lecture unto itself.
Yeah, you know I want that lecture.
Okay, we'll see. Yeah. So, firstly, before I even start answering, let me tell you that the bottom line is my conclusion that I'm going to say is that I am uncertain. So at the end, I don't have a clear conclusion. Having said that, there are two things here. That's the issue. On the one hand, Torah is eternal. Torah will never change. It was given to us, to the world, at Sinai, over 3,000 years ago, and it is nitzchi, it's eternal. All the mitzvahs are forever and ever, literally. Having said that, that's the simple, straightforward shot, simple meaning. Then, on the deeper level, on the inner level, there won't be any impurity. Or as the verse says, I will remove the spirit of tumah, of impurity, from the earth. So, basically what that means is there won't be any klipa, which means that everything is going to receive its vitality, its life, its energy, its existence directly from Hashem in a way of kedusha, of holiness, of sanctity. Well, no klipa. Now, if there's no klipa, how are there all these forbidden things? Will that change? So the chazir, the pig, is one animal, and it actually says that that's why it's called chazir, in biblical terminology because it has the exact root. The word chazir literally has the root of the word return. So it will return to be permitted. But what about all the other animals that don't chew their cud and have split hooves? They need both of those in order to be kosher. Or what about all those animals that are listed, all the birds that are listed in the Torah that are prohibited? Torah is eternal. So if you tell me that there won't be any more impurity and there won't be any more klipa, well, then that means that everything should be permissible even for the Jew. But on the other hand, we're saying the Torah is eternal. So those are facts. And exactly how that works out and how it would play out practically is what I started off by saying that I'm not sure.
I think that's why he's bringing in a little bit of chapter 26 in Igros HaKodesh, because the Alter Rebbe talks about it a little bit there. And he says that things are going to be permitted, like, for instance, doing something on Shabbos to save a life, but there's still going to be, well, I guess that doesn't line up with what I was getting ready to say, but there's still the impurity of the thing that, even though seemingly it's permissible, it still has the impurity attached to it. For instance, like eating pig to save one's life, it becomes permissible, but there's
That's
still
something else.
Oh,
That's
okay. That's
to
what
save,
I was.
right? No, to save a life, then the Torah itself says that it's all permitted.
Because he kind of
I'm-
talks about this whole conversation there in 26, but I don't. Yeah, I'm with the same questions as you, I guess. So very good.
I mean, I do have thoughts about it, but I don't have sources and I don't have a clear conclusion, so I don't want to just say something.
I'm with you on that. I think practically, and from what the Alter Rebbe says, it seems like practically, when it comes to halacha, like an actual practice, nothing's really going to change. But the fact that there's a spiritual inner element is going to change,
Right.
or some such. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Sure. I wish I could have, more absolute clarity, but I want to be honest.
And the reason why I bring it up too is because there are groups out there that are saying, "Oh no, these things are permissible," and I'm trying to fight those kinds of ideas. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. Good for you.
Gershom.
Thank you, Rabbi. Me and my Abba, we talked about how, for example, with Adam and Eve, how Eve ate the forbidden fruit from the tree, and how Adam eventually ate it. I kind of asked this question to him, and we talked about what if they didn't eat from the tree of knowledge and of good and evil. He said that they, as a society, as humans, we would just be like angels, basically. And I wanted to ask you, Rabbi, what else? What else could there be if Adam and Eve were to not eat from that tree?
Okay. At this point, some 5,785 years after they did eat from it, and everything was altered and changed, it's totally theoretical. But that's fair enough. And it's one of those cases of should have, could have, would have. It's very, very deep. And it's brought down by the second Chabad Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Dovid, based on a midrash. And he says as follows. It's not a simple concept. I'll try to simplify it. We know that on the one hand, we do have choice, free choice. They were given a commandment and they disobeyed. And for that, not only punishment, but consequence. So to try to imagine what would have happened had they not eaten from the tree of knowledge. Well, the world would have been completely different. And there wouldn't be any death at all. The whole concept of death was introduced by that. There wouldn't be any impurity. And as we touched upon some of the things here in the book, all animals would just eat hay, and there was vegetation. No such thing as animal devouring another animal. There would be tremendous knowledge of Hashem. Hashem's presence would be so felt for all of creation, surely for human beings. So there would be no wars. It would be a natural world, but the way nature was back then, which to us seems supernatural. Hashem created the world, and he set things into motion, the 6 days of creation. He put those things in there, and he's constantly recreating the world every single second. And that's what the world would have been like. If you get into details, so then there's certain things which are questionable. For example, there were no clothes. No clothes were necessary. There was no shame as a negative thing. Nothing was embarrassing of the human body because nothing is sinful, so there's no shame. And the whole world would have been this perfect world. Now, here's the part that the Mitzvah Rabbi explains. It was really part of the divine plan that they should disobey and eat from the tree and ruin the world for a very long time. And now we need to rectify that and step into the picture and to redeem the world and work on it until we get to the Messianic era and bring complete redemption to all of creation. That was part of the plan. So it was a setup. And then you get into the difficulty, then he didn't really have a choice. Then it's so unfair. Hashem says, don't eat from it, and he forced them to eat from it. It was a setup. And it had to look like they really had a choice. And it couldn't be that he would say, eat from it and destroy the world. No, it had to come in such a way. So that was really the plan from the very beginning. Destruction and exile was all part of the divine plan. You could take it really, really much further. That's the way it was when the Jewish nation made the golden calf. Shortly after they received the Torah, the destruction of the Holy Temple, even though it was because of the Jewish people's sins, and they are punished for it, and there are consequences which automatically happen because of the destruction, because of the sins. But the deeper and the behind the scenes is that it's all divinely orchestrated. It's a very deep thing over here. I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm trying to bring out in as simple words as I can. It's almost like a puppet who is given the knowledge that he can really control himself. And the person does have choice, but really behind the scenes, it's all being orchestrated. So it's what we don't know about, and therefore at the time it's really a choice that we're truly making. It's not fake, but it's all a setup. And that's because Hashem wanted to make this world the only physical, lowly world, because all the other worlds up there are all spiritual. So there's a down chain of creation till we get to this physical world. And in this physical world, he wants a dwelling place, but he wants it to be such a low place that there should actually be not only potential for sin, not only potential for evil, not only potential for disobedience, but there should be an actualization of sin and disobedience. And therefore a mixture of evil into this world that then we need to step in and redeem the world that we messed up. That's all part of what he wants. And that's what happened. So you could talk about what the world would have been like, but it was never really going to be like that until we get to that point by making it bringing the Messianic era, which is, of course, ultimately what's going to be. And that's what it says, that the spirit of Mashiach preceded the creation of the world. So the whole idea of the world needing to be redeemed by Mashiach was there from before the whole plan of even creating the world. But it's really, there's a lot to say about that. But I hope you understand a little bit of what I'm saying.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi.
It's very deep. All right.
James.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to try and be quick with this, but I just have to say it. So I found in my own studies that to birur, to extract these sparks and things, even as a non-Jew, we're allowed to be oisek in the Torah of the 7 even. And the Rambam talks about this. So we're interacting with the Torah, and we're really trying to understand, even if it's a simple level, even though the 7 can be at times not so simple. But we're doing this work, and we are able to gain knowledge of the tree we're able to gain the knowledge from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but we're allowed to separate this goodness and badness basically through the Torah, through the mitzvahs, through the 7 even. And I've learned that the way to the tree of life, the Roshei Tevot, the beginning letters of the tree of life is lo dot, no knowledge. And the way back to the tree of life is by studying the Torah and actually engaging yourself in Torah study. So it's so important for us, whether you're Jewish or non-Jewish, wherever you're starting, if it's just in the 7, or if you're Jewish and you're in Taryah also, or whatever. But it's so important to be engaged in Torah study and begin this process. This is huge, like what we're doing. All of us here that are engaged in Torah study, it hasn't been done, if at all, for thousands of years. And it's so important that we're doing what it is that we're doing by engaging in Torah study and trying to apply this.
Thank you. And before I forget, a commercial for all the Benos Noach, all the women. You can go to here and watch the various different classes for Noachide women given by Mrs. Turin. That would be on Benos Rabbeinu, BNOSRABBEINU, Benos Rabbeinu, and over there you look for Benos Noach. And we're up to page 361B, the permitted use of animals and physical resources. So we're looking at next week with the help of Hashem. Thank you, everybody. Stay well.
All right, thank you.
All the best.
Amen.
Much success to everyone in all of your endeavors.
Thank you,
Amen.
Rabbi.